story about your first pro wrestling tryout with Ole and Gene Anderson. I'm just wondering if you could tell us that story.
The story of Ole and Gene Anderson?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds like it was quite a beating.
There's a lot of things. I'll try to abbreviate the story. I had made the decision I wanted to be a professional wrestler. It was hard, really, really difficult to get to be a professional wrestler back when I wanted to break in. Went to schools and training centers, and it was a very closed business. Guys were held accountable for whoever they broke into the wrestling business. So it was really hard. I'd spent, I was just a teenager, but I'd spent, a couple years calling different offices around the country trying to convince somebody to train me. Couldn't find anybody. Finally, just by chance, I had contacted Crockett's office in Charlotte, and Gene happened to be working in the office that day and answered the phone. Told me they were going to have a tryout, like in October. Well, I had just graduated from high school in that year. Like, perfect. I'll go down there. So, got a job, and part-time job, and I, washing dishes, and I sold my car and bought a Greyhound bus ticket to Charlotte, North Carolina, which that was probably far more brutal than anything that Ole and Gene ever did to me. Because it was 24 hours of hell to get there, and then 24 hours of hell to get back. It was even worse getting back because I had gotten my ass kicked by Ole and Gene. So, showed up, and Gene was the only one that was there, and he passed out release forms. So, had the blank where your name is, and then a blank of who you were holding harmless. So I signed Gene's name. I put Gene Anderson, and Ole showed up with like 6 guys. That the smallest guy was like the size I am now. Okay. And these were all guys they were already working with. They were all trading. So there were maybe 30, 35 guys that were down there to try out at that time. And we all went to the Charlotte Coliseum because Crockett was having a show that night. And so they took us out and made us run 5 miles around the old parking lot behind the Charlotte Coliseum, which was you kind of ran across, then you ran up, then you ran up a little more, then you ran back down. So it was a little circular outfit. Came back in, you did 500 free squats. As soon as you got done with the 500 free squats, you got dropped down and you ran the Coliseum stairs. The stairs in between the seats, you ran all the way up, all the way down, over, all the way up, all the way down, over, all the way up, all the way around. Got done with that, you did 400 push-ups. So it didn't matter how you did them. You had to do 400. Even if you just picked yourself up and fell on the floor. It didn't matter how long it took, you had to do 400 push-ups. So what they were doing was blowing you up, and they were trying to crack a lot of the guys that tried out. So we went from maybe 35 after the run, we're now down to maybe 28. After we did the squats, we're now down to 20. Now after we're doing the stairs, we're down to 17. Now we're down to 15. Push-ups, you're down to 10. And then it's, you had to put somebody on your back and run the length of the Coliseum and run back. Switch, back, and then do jumping jacks until it was your turn to go in the ring. So what they were doing was they already had the other 6 guys in the ring with Ole, and then you got in the ring, or each prospective guy got in the ring, would have to get down in the amateur wrestling position, in the defensive position, all fours. And then what Ole was doing was trying to teach those guys how to, I don't know what other things he was trying to teach with everybody else, but with me, how to pancake a guy out, put him on his belly, grapevine the leg, and rear chin lock the guy. So if you got through guy 1, then you had to get down and do it with guy 2. Well, by the time you get in the ring, you're shot. I mean, you're shaking your arms and your legs, and just from exhaustion. Somehow I got through guy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Get to guy 6, who's just, like this. Always screaming at me and trying to intimidate me. And I don't, I just, wasn't clicking. Maybe if it had, I probably would have just like, okay, I quit. But the guy bellies me out, grapevines my leg, rear chin locks me. I get to all fours somehow. And the guys, I won't, if I could have spoken, I might have given up, but Ole's like screaming at me, do you give up? You give up? I couldn't say anything because the guy had my jaw clamped shut. So Ole takes that as, I won't give up. So he immediately tells him to break, put me down again and do it again. Okay. Does it again. Clamps it on me. Ole's in my face. I again get to all fours somehow. The guy can't grapevine my leg. Get to all fours. And the guy, and Ole's screaming in my face, do you give up? Do you give up? At that point, yeah, I was going to give up. But I couldn't say I was going to give up because, again, my jaw was clamped completely shut. So Ole's like, that's it, get out. I thought he meant me. I went to go get out. He goes, you're not leaving. Turn around. Gene slides in the ring. I get back. Ole tells me to get back in all fours. Now, Ole has been the guy who's been stretching guys after all the other guys. They went through all the other guys plus all the other physical exhaustion. He gets in, stretches you, hooks you, makes you tap, sends you on your way. So one guy, he had rear chin locked and broke his jaw and knocked him out. So I get down on all fours. I'm serious.
That's hilarious.
I get down on all fours. Gene gets in the ring, and all of a sudden, he's all over me. I mean, he's pulling my hair. He's fish hooking my mouth. He's digging in my eye. He's, just all. I can't even imagine what he's doing. I'm confused. So all of a sudden, he goes to grab my balls. So I'm trying to get away. So I grab him by the balls, and we're rolling around. And I got a hold of his balls, and he's still trying to grab my balls. And finally, gets on top of me and puts his thumb in my eye. And he's like screaming, "Do you want to lose your eye? Do you want to lose your eye?" And Ole now becomes the voice of reason. Goes, "Hey, no, that's all right, right?" And Ole separates us. Now, in the meantime, he has smashed my face into the bottom rope, which is basically aircraft cable on those WCW rings. Breaks my nose, and has I'm like cuts and scratches all over me. I find out later when I go in the hotel room, I take my shirt off. I've got bite marks on my back where he bit me. The man bit me on the back. I got clumps of hair missing where he pulled my hair. My mouth is busted where he fish hooked me. And he's screaming at me to get out of the ring. So I go to the back of the ring, go back, get cleaned up, come back out, ask what time the show was, took the last bit of money I had for food, bought a ticket to the wrestling show, watched the wrestling show that night, which featured Roddy Piper and Greg Valentine in a dog collar match where, Valentine split open Piper's ear. And Sergeant Slaughter was on the card, Steamboat, a lot of Jake Roberts. They had a big battle royal. John Studd was there. And then walked 5 miles back to the bus station the next day, which was the most painful thing I've ever done in my life because all the lactic acid and everything else and all beat up. Got on the bus and 24 hours home and then kept pursuing it.
You were addicted at that point.
I was going to do it whether come hell or high water. So.
Did you ever hold anything against Ole and Gene for that, or was that just the way things were done in that day?
I did it first, yeah. But then as I got older, I got more experience, I understood. I mean, it's all you have to understand that a lot of those guys at that time, they couldn't function in regular society and have a regular 9-to-5 job. Like a lot of guys these days they can go out and do another job. These guys, if they were either wrestlers or they were probably going to be in jail. I mean, they were very intelligent, very classy individuals, but they were the most eclectic, eccentric group of people you'd ever want to meet, and they just didn't fit. They were either ex-jocks, they were ex-football players, ex-athletes, or they were, potential criminals. I mean, that's the truth. And you had to protect the business at all costs. So here come a bunch of wannabes. First, you got to make sure that they really want to do it. Secondly, if everybody leaves, oh, wrestling's fake. And that's a big problem for today. So that everybody's, that's fake. Anybody can do it. Not everybody can do it. And it takes a tremendous amount of passion to do what we do. So those guys, all those 35 guys that left there, the worst that would have happened was they'd leave and they go, you know, hey, wrestling might be fake or whatever. I'll tell you what, they kicked my ass. And for me to be a wrestler, it's not worth it. I'll tell you that right now. You have to be tough. And they made people at least respect it in some manner.
And speaking of eccentric individuals, you're from the Ohio area where the Sheik, the original Sheik, was very popular. You want to just tell us your memories of him growing up, and I believe you actually worked for him, what it was like to work for the man.
The original Sheik was terrifying. As a kid, he was, you know, a small guy, but he was larger than life. And because he believed in his own gimmick. And you believed in his gimmick. I've seen grown people, when he go at a crowd, grown people just separate like the Red Sea. And he was so effective at it. Even after I'd gotten into the wrestling business and I was on shows with him initially, I was like 18, 19, 20 years old, I was still terrified in the locker room of him coming in, and, you know, the myth that if you had to wrestle him, he had the razor on the end of the pencil and he'd just gig you and you wouldn't have a question, or, you know, he wouldn't have a choice. He'd just do whatever he wanted with you. And he wasn't a wrestler, you know what I mean? But he was a guy that had such a persona that it terrified you. And even when working for him, you were always like walking on eggshells, but you were afraid that you'd just say something and it would set him off, and you're out, this crazy guy would come, just like what you'd seen in the ring. But it was farthest from the truth. I mean, it was nothing like that.
And what were the payoffs like working for him?
Terrible. But what I understand now. At the time when I was that age, I didn't understand it as well as I do now. And that is that your value is based on what your potential of selling tickets is, and that's it. So a lot of times I was POOM at that time, which is +1 on the match, or additional all-stars, or other great bouts. That means that my name was not on that poster at all. So whatever they paid me was whatever they paid me, because I was not a factor in how many people were in that building. Do you understand? It's not like today everybody believes, well, I trained and I've paid my dues and I'm entitled to. You're not entitled to shit. Make that perfectly clear. You're not. Just because you're a wrestler and you're good doesn't mean anything. You serve one of two purposes in this business. You're either the thing that sells tickets, or you're one of the things that helps sell tickets. There is no third option. So if your name's not even featured on the poster, how much of a factor were you in how many people attended that show? Well, then what percentage do you deserve of that house? Right. So, you know, payoffs when I first started were abysmal. I mean, I couldn't afford, they used to have these things called Stewart sandwiches that they were horrendous, that you get in a gas station, and they were cold. They were terrible warm. They were even worse cold, okay? And back then, and I'm dating myself, but they didn't have microwaves in gas stations like they do now. So, like, I learned how to take a Boy Scout mess kit and some muffler tape, and I would put those sandwiches and other food items in the Boy Scout mess kit because they were like 50 cents. That's all I could afford. And then you'd put it on the manifold of the car and you'd drive for a little while and you heat the sandwich up. I called it the barbecue. That was the only way I could eat. So otherwise I ate cold food, or I didn't eat anything.
And the Sheik's nephew is Sabu. This is jumping ahead a bit, but while we're on the subject of the Sheik, what was your relationship like with Sabu over the years?
I think Sabu's a really wonderful guy. I think he's underrated. I think he's underappreciated. I think that he's made more of an impact on the wrestling business than what he's really given credit for. Style-wise and other things. I think if Sabu could have, in some cases, decision-wise, gotten out of his own way, could have been a huge, huge star. But, there was times that he made mistakes and made decisions based on ideas and thoughts that might have worked for his uncle, because it was a different time and a different place, and not to mention his uncle owned a territory that made a lot of money that a lot of people wanted to come to, so that gave his uncle a certain amount of stroke to be able to make decisions that he made that, Sabu didn't have those situations to be able to do those things, and sometimes he short-sightedly cut off opportunities that could have allowed him to have a bigger star.
Okay, and I understand that you did some enhancement matches for WWE earlier on in your career before you actually joined the company. How did those matches come about, and were those actual tryouts, or were they just
No.
TV matches?
No, I did like 2 or 3 enhancement matches, like a couple TVs in Michigan. I think those came about through Dennis Kaspowitz. Somehow was contacted, probably from Brooklyn Brawler, I think, at the time, maybe. I don't remember. It's been so long ago, and there were only like, I think I worked with Smoking Guns once, Undertaker once, and I think Marty Jannetty maybe once. I think I might have been it. I think it were like a total of 3 matches, and they weren't tryout matches or anything like that. They were literally just, hey, we need some guys, and and I came in and I had good matches with everybody I worked, and then I just never heard from them again. That was it.
Okay. And many people...
Not many people know that. I'm surprised you know that.
We've been doing our research.
Apparently.
And a lot of people don't know either that you actually trained with Dan Severn to prepare him for his UFC debut. So
Yeah.
you want to just tell us about what it was like training him for pro wrestling, and also what it was like training him for UFC, which was kind of an unknown sport at the time.
Yeah. I met Dan Severn through Dennis Kaspowitz again. Dennis was an amateur wrestler, was an AAU champion in Michigan, and was a player coach for the U.S. Olympic team. And Dennis knew Dan. Dan had expressed an interest in getting professional wrestling. I met Dan, and at the time there was a company in Japan that was called UWFI, and it was a company that was kind of the precursor to what modern day MMA is kind of. It was a group of guys Japanese wrestlers who kind of came out and said, pro wrestling is BS here in Japan, and we're going to do it for real. And they just changed the style of pro wrestling, where they didn't shoot guys in the ropes. When they kicked you, they really kicked you. And they only struck you open hand, but they really struck you. So they worked stiff. When they put a hold on, they just worked the holds, the submission holds. Every match ended with either a knockout or a submission, and it was as fake as regular pro wrestling because the finish was predetermined. And that's the only thing that's fake in wrestling, is that the finish is predetermined. And the same goes with UWFI. They also went a step further, that they only used, especially foreign guys, they only used guys with like legitimate backgrounds, notable legitimate backgrounds. So like Gary Albright became a really big star for that company because he had a really significant amateur career. So I knew when I met Dan that there was a good opportunity that if I trained Dan, that Dan could possibly go there. Because one of the things, unless you're the exception, most of the time the rule is that amateur wrestlers, it's very tough for them to make that transition from amateur wrestling into the mindset of being a professional wrestler. There are a couple, Brock and Kurt and numerous other ones that have had extensive amateur careers, but a large part of them, it's really hard to, especially if they've done it for a very long time like Dan, to really successfully make that transition. So we met, Dan got, I started training Dan and then for professional wrestling, and then he got the opportunity to go to UWFI. And then Phyllis Lee, a lady that worked with Sabu and X-Pac and the Malenkos and myself, and she was like a den mother to wrestlers. I mean, she helped everybody out. Dan expressed an interest in going to the UFC. I think it was at the time they had only 2 pay-per-views or 3. I think it was 3.
I think he started in the 4th.
He started in 4th, UFC 4. And he tried to get into the UFC to go fight and was unsuccessful. And then Phyllis went and got him into the UFC 4, into Oklahoma City, or it was Tulsa. We flew into Oklahoma City, and they approached me about training him because I had some background in martial arts and stuff. And to be quite honest, I mean, it's not like we spoke earlier. We didn't know what we were doing. Nobody knew what they were doing. It wasn't. It's not like it back then was not like it is now. I thought it was better back then, because the real heart of it was taking different people with different styles and putting them against each other to see which style was really the best. And now MMA has become its own style. I mean, it has its ground game, its boxing, its kicks. It covers everything, and you kind of know the other fighter is going to train a certain way, and he's going to work on certain things. You had no idea. For one, we didn't know who was going to even be at the fight. Didn't know anybody was going to be at the
sumo wrestler or karate.
Well, you didn't know who the other competitors were. One, two, if you didn't know who you were going to fight, because it was a true tournament, because you had to fight 3 times.
Yeah.
And 3, you might fight a sumo, like you said, a sumo guy the first time, a boxer the second time. There was a boxer, big black guy, boxer in there. I think he lost his first fight, but man, he was jacked. And if he'd have hit somebody with a punch, that'd have been it. Wouldn't matter what you'd have done with him. So you didn't know what to prepare for. You didn't know how to prepare for it. We were just shooting in the dark. Dan went there and he had to fight some Muay Thai guy in the first round. And then the second guy was a long style karate. And then the third guy was Hoist Gracie. It's like, well, how do you prepare for that? And neither one of us had any experience with it, but he did great. And then he went on to have a great career with it,
And you spent some time in ECW in 1995. How did you enter that company at that time? And I understand you also had a couple matches with Taz around.
Oh yeah, Taz and I had known each other for a while, and I got brought in really by Rob Feinstein. And Rob had was running a show and had known of me and stuff that I'd done with Sabu and stuff like that, and he kind of was the thing that brought me in. And then and Sabu and Taz spoke up for me, and then Paul was going to start to do things with me, and then just as I was starting to do things there, Cornette contacted me, and the only reason, and I'd known Cornette for years, but Cornette had just over the last couple, a few years prior, had opened up Smoky Mountain, and had never had an opportunity for me, but suddenly had an opportunity for me. And you know why he suddenly had an opportunity for me? Because he watched the UFC pay-per-view and saw me in the corner of Dan Severn and saw me make a smart-ass remark on an interview, and Eddie Gilbert was supposed to work with what now is Kane, Unabomb, Glenn Jacobs, and Eddie went off to Puerto Rico and he needed a guy to be Kane's partner, and he saw me do that and was like, that's the guy. And then that's how I got the opportunity in Smoky Mountain. And Cornette was fine with me working for him and Paul. Paul wasn't, even though he said he was, but never booked me again once I started working for Jimmy. So I started working for Jimmy, and then out of that, I got the dark match. Eric Bischoff contacted me, which was a whole weird thing. And then Jim Ross was there, and then I went to WWF.
And also, before we go into the WWE, you mentioned earlier on when we were talking that you also did some matches for WCW, which I'm going to guess is before you were signed by WWE.
Oh yeah, a long time, yeah. Because I started out when the territories were still in existence, so I went around and was working, and then they started fading out, and then that meant, and then the Sheik had his stranglehold over Ohio and Michigan, yeah, parts of West Virginia and Eastern Kentucky and Virginia, Western Pennsylvania, all of his territory in Michigan was wide open, and everybody wanted that territory. So, Ole knew of the territory and wanted to come up and start running it, and TBS, Turner Broadcasting was running Georgia Championship Wrestling, WCW, and so they started running tours going up into Ohio and Michigan and the old Sheik's territory. And whenever they would come up, the Murniks would run the towns for them, and the Murniks needed, a couple local guys or whatever, and I would get booked. working on those at that time.
And what was this conversation with Bischoff that you mentioned?
Oh, that was where they contacted me. Just the difference, you know. And I love Eric. Eric and I worked in TNA together, and I have nothing but the utmost respect for him. You know, I just, from my standpoint, it was such a weird thing because I'll never forget it. I was contacted when I was in Smoky Mountain, and Eric Bischoff, you know, Jeremy Borash is the one who first contacts me, and I'd never met Jeremy or anything like that. And they arranged this a dark match that they want me to come down and work. I'm like, okay. So I fly in to Atlanta, just to give you a distinct difference in how the company's operated. Scott D'Amore was down there at the time, which was good because I could, he was, bringing guys over to center stage so they could do, enhancement talent. So I fly in, and Sandy Scott, who had worked for the Crockett's and stuff for years, tells me there's a train that you can take that'll take you to the CNN Center or wherever it was, and that was the hotel they were putting me up at. I fly in, come in, check in the hotel, wait for a couple hours, never hear from anybody. I finally called Janie Angle, who was who had set things up for me, was the assistant there at WCW. She's like, oh yeah, you need to be at center stage tomorrow. What time? I wouldn't have known. Nobody contacted me. Nobody told me. So I call, D'Amore, get a ride with him over to center stage because I don't know how to get in the building. No nothing. Get there at 1 o'clock. Literally sit there for hours. Nobody talks to me. Nobody says a word to me. Couple, some of the boys say hi. I say hi to them. And I come from, the school of you're in a new locker room. You go find a corner. You sit down. You shut up. Stay out of the way, Don't go around trying to be a locker room lawyer and teaching everybody everything or talking to everybody. Shake hands, be respectful, and then sit. I wait until, Terry Taylor comes in, talks to me. Again, I love Terry. Briefly, and they're all busy. And I'm friendly, talk to everybody. And then Pinzer comes in and tells me I need to sign a release. Or he doesn't even say release. He goes, sign this. Just shoves it in my face. I go, well, what is it? Well, you need to sign this if you want to wrestle. Well, can I look at it? So he goes, what? Like he gets offended. And I read it over and I sign it and I give it to him and he pisses off. He gets, walks off. Oh, Kevin Sullivan came in too and was like, what's the problem? What's the issue? I'm like, there's no issue. I just wanted to read what you have me sign. That's all. Penzer went and made it like it was a big deal, like I had caused this big stink. I just was like, can I read it? So sign that, get that done. I got to work with this kid. I can't remember his name, who literally sprayed Pam cooking spray on himself before he went out. I'll never forget that. So go out and have the match. I didn't do myself, probably
I've actually heard of people doing that in amateur wrestling.
Yeah. Oh, they do. The Muay Thai guy put oil all over himself that would make harder for Dan to grab a hold of him in UFC. And so I had it was, if I'd have watched it today, I wouldn't book me. Fuck. So he had the match, come backstage. Nobody still talks to me, right? Finally, Eric Bischoff calls me in his office. I go, hey, thank you very much, blah, blah, blah. I just want you to let know, because Jim Ross had contacted me right before I went down there. I said, I just want you to let know that they've asked me to come to Stanford next week. And he goes, oh, you owe it to yourself and your family. You need to go and hear what they have to say. I have to go do my pay-per-view, and when I get back, we'll give you a call. I'll go, okay, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you very much. That was it. There was no discussion of money, no discussion of anything, that was the whole conversation. And I thanked him for, his time, and we were done. So I'd spent that whole day. And then the next day, I find my way back to the airport, fly home. The next week, I fly to LaGuardia, New York. There's a man waiting at the base of the escalator with a sign with my name. He takes me out, puts me in a limo, drives me to Stanford. I show up, J.J. Dillon and, what was her name? Something Wolf, Lisa Wolf. Ugh. head of HR, meet me. They take me on a tour of the entire WWE facilities. They take me on a tour of all of the television studio, and then I go in and meet with Vince for 2 hours. Hand me the contract, and if I want it, sign it. I go, well, I spoke to Eric Bischoff the week before. I'm out of respect. I want to let you know. Oh, well then, owe it yourself, but you want it, let us know. Notice the difference between what was done in one place and what was done in the other. And I'm not knocking anybody. It just was such a dramatic difference. So I don't hear anything from WCW until all of a sudden I get wind that, Jeremy Borash for some reason calls me and says that I went in and made demands for like a couple $100,000 or I wasn't going to work or something like that to Eric Bischoff. And I go, I never asked for any money. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know. And this whole convoluted thing came about, and my behavior in the locker room and all these things that were just absurd that never occurred, that were born out of partly because I asked to read the release before I signed it, and then Pinzer spun it into something that was far worse than what it actually was. And then I don't know where that conversation with Eric Bischoff came from, and I waited for 2, maybe 3 weeks to hear from them, to get out of, because I told Eric I would. And I stayed true to my word, and then I called J.J. Dillon up and I said, I'm signing the contract, I'll be glad to come. And then Vince called me and had this idea for this Avatar gimmick, which I think at the time, because he was trying, really wanted to do something that captured like the Power Rangers were really, really ultra popular and Mortal Kombat was, and he wanted to try and capture something like that. But I had been a heel. You got to understand that I had been a heel, and this might not make any excuses, but I had been a heel for 13, 14, 15 years at that point. And now all of a sudden he wanted to make me a babyface who not only was a babyface, but carried a mask to the ring, put it on, and then took it off. And that was completely a departure from anything I'd ever done. And and you take whatever, it's your job to take shit and make Shinola, and I dropped the ball, but there were a lot of other contributing factors to it at that time too that didn't help. Right. That kind of set a handicap against me. But that was me. I get the opportunity, I have to make the best of it.
So they decided to switch you to become the Leif Cassidy character. Was that just because the Avatar was not getting over? They gave me one match with it and a couple matches on a house show, and then that was it. That was the extent of it. And then it must just, maybe I just didn't do what the vision, or now I could work that gimmick completely differently because I understand, because I have so much more of a grasp of things because of experience of all the mistakes I've made. But at that time, it was beyond me. So how did the new Rockers gimmick come about? They just wanted to...
I think Bruce Pritchard saw that, I looked, Marty and I kind of favored each other a little bit because I was growing my hair out and all that. And then that was, again, we were given that. Marty, is amazing. He's such an incredibly talented guy, and I don't think he gets the credit that he deserves. And I can't fault him, but they wanted to and what I kind of took as that we were like these guys that were still wanted to be teen idols, and the whole ideal I had was that I was a guy that was going to be so goofy and happy that you wanted to see me get my ass kicked, and then Marty never really threw himself totally into it, and I don't blame him because it probably kind of rubbed the original Rockers gimmick the wrong way, but he did it. But it never really clicked. We had a little bit of a run, and then we were right back where we kind of started from,
Did Marty quit the company? Is that what led to the end of that?
Marty was quitting the company, yeah. And he was going to go to WCW.
Do you think Marty would have done better overall over the years if he hadn't quit so much?
Marty didn't just quit. Marty got fired a lot. Yeah. Got released a lot.
Bunch of issues.
Well, he had his own. Everybody's got their own demons, but Marty was Marty's remarkable, very talented, very creative guy. He deserves a lot more credit than what he's ever gotten. And to always be knocked as the Marty Jannetty of the team, which is just BS, because, Marty was really good.
Because I understand they actually wanted to give him the Intercontinental title at one point from Shawn Michaels, but there was an issue of him.
There might have been
some type of thing popped up.
Yeah, a lot of wrestlers are very self-destructive. Well, we all pretty much are to some degree or another. We're not right. I mean, look at what we try to do for a fucking living. You can't be straight in the head and do this for a living.
And you ended up from there back in ECW. What happened with that situation? Because you were still
kind of my own fault to a degree, but also the best of all situations, and that was, I was doing the Leaf Cassidy thing for a while by myself. I was real frustrated. And that was, and my own frustration was born out of my own stupidity, my own ignorance, and my own immaturity, and in my believing that I wasn't given opportunities, when really every time I was put on TV, I was given an opportunity. And I was put on TV a lot. Even as Leaf Cassidy, I was put on TV a lot. People don't realize just how much TV time I've gotten over the years, and I didn't realize until I really started looking back, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, I was on TV a lot. Doesn't matter if you win or lose. That's the stupidest mark thing to think like. Wrestling on TV is a commercial, and you're a product. How much commercial time did I get over the years, even as Leaf Cassidy? But I was frustrated. I was very short-sighted. I couldn't see beyond the nose on my face. I had a match with Flash Funk that apparently impressed the right people. I'll never forget it. Shawn Michaels came and tried to have a conversation with me. I had my head so far up my ass. Bruce Pritchard came and tried to have a conversation with me right after. Still, my head was so far up my ass. They apparently went back and reported that my head was up my ass, and then it never went I never went any further. So I just became more and more and more frustrated. And about that time, Paul started some type of working relationship. Paul Heyman started a working relationship with Vince McMahon. I was buddies with Candido. We were really good friends, and he was like Paul's right-hand guy. Chris played an important role, because I said I knew in my heart I had to get out of WWE and go somewhere else and get myself back over in order to come back to WWE in a better spot or go someplace else. Otherwise, my career was over. I knew it. I knew it, and I had to do it. So I had a 2-year contract, and when the 90-day term came up, I wrote and asked for my release, and Bruce Pritchard rolled my contract over, wouldn't let me quit, so I went to Chris. We had been talking the whole time, and Chris went to Paul, and Paul went to Vince, and I was put on loan to ECW at the time. And Paul had no plans for me. Paul had nothing. No grandiose ideas. I showed up there, and I started doing different things, because right before I left, I lost a couple matches, and I went crazy and went after Jim Ross, and nobody called me down about it. Nobody said, just so you understand, the big BS thing is that Vince doesn't want you to get over, couldn't be any more mistaken. Vince wants everyone to get over, because the more everyone gets over, the more he's successful and the more money he makes. So once you step through that curtain, you're free to do whatever you want, but you got to make sure it works. That's all, and then it's worth watching. That's your responsibility. Don't believe all the crap that you hear about. Well, yeah, there might be guys around Vince that will do so, but they can't. Nobody can do anything to stop you from getting over once you step through that rope, through that curtain, and nobody can do anything to keep you from doing whatever business you need to do once you step through that curtain.
So were you paid by Vince in ECW then, or by?
I didn't ask Paul. I don't care as long as the money's there.
Right.
Paul paid me, as far as I know.
Okay. So you were still just under contract, but...
Well, I was still under contract to WWE the whole time I was with ECW.
So you were getting checks from WWE?
No, I was not getting checks.
That was before the days where they were giving...
Yeah, I never had at that point, I didn't have a downside guarantee contract.
Okay. So you would only...
I had a contract that you were guaranteed 12 dates a year at $100 a date. That's it. Right. And it was that thick for $1,200.
So before I ask you about how you came up with the head gimmick, you brought up Chris Candido. I have to ask you about Sunny because she's such a controversial character. What you thought of her and the way she treated Chris over the years.
I don't know how she treated Chris. And the reason I don't know how she treated Chris is because I'm not Chris.
Right.
I can tell you that I saw things between the both of them. I saw both their behaviors, and who's it for me to judge? Do you know what I mean? Tammy's been one of my dear friends for years because of Chris, But I met the two of them together, and I always knew them together, and I always saw all of the shenanigans with them. He never got rid of her. They never broke up. So whatever it was between the two of them, apparently it worked. I don't know if it was good. I don't know if it was bad. I didn't have to wake up with it, and I didn't have to go to bed with it. So it wasn't for me to judge. Because if it didn't affect my life, then why do I care? I care for Chris, and I used to get upset, but there was at one point when I finally realized, well, if Chris isn't getting upset, why am I? I don't understand. This is not going to impact my life. I'm not dating her. I'm not living with her. I'm not sleeping with her. So why do I care? And I don't know what he may be doing on the other side. Because you got to remember, there's always three sides of the story: his, hers, and the truth. So.
Have you watched her porn?
No. I have no interest. No desire to watch it. I didn't watch China's either. I had no interest in watching China's. China was a dear, sweet friend,
What do you think of her whole situation since you brought it up?
I think that, China was a sweetheart. And she made an impact. And she had, again, look at what we're doing for a living. Let's put this into perspective. Grown adults who are dressing in their underwear, oiling themselves up to fake fight another grown adult for money. Now, it's not like in the movies or other forms of entertainment where you don't really, they set up the camera angles and you don't really get punched, you don't really get kicked, you don't have to take a bump, you don't have to fall downstairs. The stuntmen do it, but even they wear pads. We do all of that stuff, and we do it all live in front of an audience, and we get the biggest rush out of it that you can ever possibly imagine. We ain't right. We're a little screwed up. So, and I tell guys all the time, especially I tell wrestlers, if you think that guys are messed up that want to do this for a living, how messed up would a hot chick have to be that would want to do this too? We can't be, and we're all wonderful, amazing people, but you think this is kind of it's a normal thing? Otherwise, everybody'd be doing it. Right. They're not. You got to be kind of a little eccentric and a little off and a little different. And with that comes a certain amount of, baggage and personal demons and things like that. That again, who am I to judge? If anybody were to look at my life, I'm sure they'd find even bad things.
Of baggage,
I haven't done a porn, but nobody's wanted to see me naked, so.
Yeah. You have a head in your bag right now, and I'm just wondering how you came up with this whole head gimmick.
At the time, I was, again, I went to ECW and I was trying to show that I had a nervous breakdown. I figured what the fans who see me the last time they saw me on WWF, I'd snapped. And I went after Jim Ross like twice. And so I must have lost my mind. And then the fans who knew me in ECW, I figured anybody that knew me that knew that I had been wrestling for as long as I'd been wrestling and I didn't have what I thought was success, that anybody normal sane person would go crazy. So I started trying to show that while I was wrestling, but none of it ever really clicked. And then one night I worked with Great Sasuke, and at the arena, and we came back, and they do that part where they made the Mother's Day parade floats on the other side of the building, and I happened to pick up a styrofoam head. And I remembered I was reading a book on abnormal psychology, and there was a lady in there who had paranoid schizophrenia with a transference disorder, meaning that she thought she heard voices from like this light, and that the light was crazy, not her. So I thought, oh, I'll start carrying this to the ring. And I remembered, Mick fooling around because he had a styrofoam head to hold his Mankind mask, and it was Bob, Holly, and Sid Vicious that were in the car. We were out in California, and we were in the back seat, and Midian had thrown up the styrofoam head, and it caught in the ceiling fan blades, I think in Montreal, actually, in the dressing room. It kind of clipped its mouth, and he was like fish hooking it and acting like he was going to have sex with it in the room, and called it Elaine. And that was, the combination of all those things kind of made me go, hey, you know what? I'm going to take this to the ring and treat it like it's a real person, and like they're talking to me, and like they're crazy and I'm not. And then I did it for a long time. And Paul was like, I hate your manager, I don't like it, blah, 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 blah. And it just kept working. People kept getting with it. And then all of a sudden, Paul was on board, and he was like, you're going to be the next great cult babyface. I'm like, you crazy? I'm a heel. I'm a psychopath talking to a head. I'm not going to be a babyface. And he's like, oh yeah. So we'd worked in New Britain, Connecticut, and then we worked in Stamford. It was like October and Halloween. And he's like, tomorrow night we were good at the arena, and I'm going to have you come out, and you're going to do something with Sandman, with the Sandman shirt around the head or whatever. And just like 2 nights before, I'd gotten the actual mannequin head, because I knew I needed one with an actual face. I was just using like styrofoam ones and stuff. And Spike Dudley and Mikey Whipwreck pulled it out of a barrel that the fans had brought a bunch of weapons for New Jack to use. So that was where I got head. And then the next night I worked with Paul, was Cato, from Thunder Bay, Ontario.
Paul Diamond.
Paul Diamond. And he went to give me a gourd buster, and my arm caught up underneath me, and it dislocated my shoulder. I mean, bad, really bad, to where it took like 3 doctors to pull it back in. And so I was home for 2 weeks because I couldn't even scoop ice cream with my arm. It was just shot. And but it didn't tear anything or anything like that. And then the November to Remember pay-per-view, what got me over again, what got me another opportunity was an interview that Candido had went and politicked for me to do, which was the interview where I was backstage in the locker room. Nobody told me what to do. Nobody said, you got to do this. It just, everybody's sitting around and I'm talking to the head. And I went off on the head about the fact that they stooged me off, that I was hurt. And that became that was the thing that made people just, love it. And then I was the only guy, I think, that got to wrestle for the world title in ECW. I never beat anybody.
Right.
I never really wrestled anybody. All I did, Paul let me go and just do vignettes all the time on my own. Charlie and Ron would take camera and we'd just go shoot stuff all the time. And it would always just be the same thing. It would be a normal circumstance. The only thing that was abnormal in the circumstance was me interacting with a head and me treating it as if it was a living person.
And despite your popularity, you were arguably probably one of the top baby faces in ECW for a while there. Is there any particular reason why they never gave you a run with the heavyweight title?
I have no idea. If I were to, venture an opinion, it would just be that, just an opinion. It'd just be speculation. It'd just be assumption. I don't know. You'd have to ask Paul.
And I guess Vince brought you back into WWE.
Vince Russo contacted me at that time.
Okay.
And this is true, and Paul, has heard this and he kind of poo-poos it, but it's the truth. I'm not, I've been around. Vince contacted me and was like, hey, I want you to send me tapes of what you're doing. I love it, blah, blah, blah. I want to talk to Vince. I'm like, I'm happy where I'm at. I don't want to come back. Oh, no, you got to do it. I said, okay, well, we'll see. Right? We're in Florida. Now, keep in mind, and I'm not bragging, I wasn't I was like over in ECW. I was super over. New opening for the show. I'm nowhere on it. Clearly, there are no plans for me here. Hey, Vince, I will send you those tapes tomorrow. Then Vince McMahon calls me up. And again, both times I was hired, I didn't speak to anybody else. I spoke to Vince McMahon. And Vince McMahon hired me, brought me in. Not hired, because you can't hire a wrestler and you can't fire him. That's a stupid fan idea. But brought me in both times to the territory.
And you ended up holding the tag team titles with Mick Foley. How did you like teaming with him, and what do you think of your whole friendship? Because it's so famous, he talks about you all the time.
Oh, he talks about me constantly.
Yeah.
His life story would be much like his penis, a short one, if he didn't have the material added in it with using me. You know, he wouldn't have a stand-up act, which he doesn't really stand up because he's too lazy. He sits down all the time. That he totally relies on me. I don't know why he's so obsessed with me, but he is, and I'm thrilled that he is, because it just keeps putting me over and keeps my name out there. So.
Have you ever considered doing your own comedy tour and making jokes about him?
I almost went and did a stand-up thing, and maybe I will, in the time's right, to do jokes about Mick, which I could listen. We like call it like it's a verbal sparring match, and you just like a boxing match, you get a right cross, you get the guy up against the ropes, things like that. I don't know how many times I've knocked him out verbally, just drilled him, knocked him out. And and in public, let him get himself over, but when it's just he and I beat him up.
And the final question I have for you about Mick is, what do you think of this rather large beard that he has right now?
Is he trying to use that to go into the stores and be able to shoplift? What is the purpose of that thing? I've seen hobos with less facial hair. I've seen gorillas with less hair on their vaginas. And let's face it, his face does look like a gorilla's vagina. So.
And you had a big run, 6-time WWE Hardcore Champion. You held the European title. Then you ended up becoming the head trainer on Tough Enough. How did you be transitioned from the wrestling to the Tough Enough coach?
I think that might have been Jim Ross. I really do. Nobody really explained it to me other than, JR came into me and said, I think it's an opportunity. Kevin Dunn came in and said it was an opportunity, and I was like, okay. But because I'd already had an existing school, and they had at that point had even used several of the guys I trained. They had Dan, Blue Meanie, there were other guys too that, I'd trained in Ohio that went on to have Truth Martinis and Ring of Honor still to this day. That was a guy that I brought into the business back then. So I think they knew that I had the experience and all that. And then Kevin introduced me to it turned out to be my best friend, one of my best friends, Big John Gaborik. And we met and talked, and then that was it. And it was awesome. I mean, it was probably one of the greatest, things I think I've ever done in the wrestling business, because it was such an amazing opportunity to be on a network show that literally millions of people that didn't even watch wrestling watched. Still to this day, I can't tell you how many people come up and, my wife never watched wrestling, but she watched Tough Enough, or I never watched wrestling, or I watched wrestling, but I didn't really care for it until I watched Tough Enough, and now I'm a even bigger fan, and I was, still to this day, I'm probably more well known for that than I am anything else that I've ever done, and it was awesome.
Would you say that John Morrison was probably the most successful Tough Enough cast member over the years?
I would say, I'd say the Miz is, because I was, Miz was part of Tough Enough 4. Morrison was right up there, and Josh Matthews has done an amazing job too. I mean, he's been very successful too. I think Nowinski could have been, if it hadn't been for, the concussion situation. And I think that, if Maven's timing wise, you know, he was really on a roll, and then he broke his leg, and I think that kind of, you know, threw things off for him.
Now, speaking of Tough Enough 4, there was an incident in that one with Daniel Puder and Kurt Angle. What were your thoughts on that situation where he got the key lock on Kurt Angle during that amateur wrestling session? There was supposed to be an amateur wrestling match in one of the segments of that Tough Enough with Kurt Angle and Daniel Puder. At one point, Puder put on a key lock, and Angle couldn't escape from it, apparently.
Right, he couldn't.
And
and that's why we don't do things like that. We try to, as much as possible, work everything so that we don't allow for outcomes that we can't control in a public setting. And there were other people who insisted, even though I advised not to have that situation, because Vince wanted Kurt to go out there and wrestle them all. And I was like, I would suggest you don't do that, because these are all young, healthy, strong guys. And I would not put Kurt at risk of doing that. Well, what do I know? And then same situation, they insisted that Big Show, when they did the thing with Big Show, that Big Show slammed the guys. And I said, I don't think you should do that. I think have him chop them, because then you don't have to rely on the other guy when he slams them to sell. If he chops them, they ain't got no choice, because that's literally like getting hit with a frying pan. Yeah. No. What do you know? And he'd slam him, and Nick, you know, popped right up, and Big Show flipped out, and, you know, trying to protect himself, and ended up cuffing him and almost knocking his head off, and it didn't do anybody any good. You know, it didn't benefit anyone.
And Puder, I believe, only lasted about a year under the contract or so.
Yeah, they offered him another contract. Here's why. Because you have to understand, it was $1 million contract over 4 years, which is still $250,000 a year. But here's the problem. $1 million worth of expectations from you. Now you're starting with literally zero knowledge and zero experience. Okay? And you're supposed to be able to produce at $1 million level. What do you think your chances of success are?
Very slim.
Very slim. So, you know, he got a $250,000 a year. They offered him, you know, because they saw the potential. I mean, he's an amazing marketer and self-promoter and charismatic individual. And they saw the potential in, you know, in keeping him and utilizing him, but they offered him less money, and he chose not to take it. So.
And another guy that's become a very controversial character over the years that was part of Tough Enough is Bill DeMott. What's your opinion of his training practices?
I don't know. I've never been trained by Bill. I know that when Bill worked with me on Tough Enough, you know, Bill was the show producers purposely teamed me up with. You know, the first one was Taz, the second one was Bob, and the third one was Bill. And then the fourth one, it was me and Bill as well. So it was always like, you know, they were the blender. They came in and rah, 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 when really I was the real heel, because I was the one that constantly put pressure on those kids all the time. I never let up. I was always pushing them. But then you'd get the big verbal rah, 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 kind of thing, and that was what Bill was. Bill played that part, and that's what he did, you know. I don't know. I've heard all the stuff. I've never been with Bill when he was training guys, per se, you know what I mean? When I have been with Bill, he just was rah, 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 gruff and gravelly, but I heard all the stuff coming out of Atlanta and out of Florida, but the short time that he was around with me in Louisville, it was just the Bill that I'd seen on Tough Enough. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying it isn't, but because enough people said that it is, that who knows. But I personally, again, if I were to offer an opinion, it would just be conjecture and assumption.
And with that Bob Holly thing with Matt Capitelli, I may not be pronouncing his last name
Matt
right.
Capitelli, yeah.
Yeah.
It was BS.
Yeah.
It was. Bob was in a bad mood. He was frustrated, and not to mention all the guys that were heaters were all having a competition amongst each other to who's going to be the worst heater, and all the boys were stirring it up in the back because they, of course, nobody in wrestling likes anyone to get anything else. Everybody's jealous of everybody. Everybody is insecure, needy, arrogant, sensitive, group of cunts. We all are. And if you got one thing, you get 30 seconds of television time, I guarantee you there's 100 people in the back that want that 30 seconds of television time. Even though they did nothing with you on that 30 seconds of television time. You were standing in the background of a vignette that featured 100 other guys, and they just saw the back of you. Somebody in the back saw you and went, why am I not that guy? So now everybody in the locker room is all going, yeah, this BS, man. These guys, they just get to go on a show and they don't have to pay no dues. Everybody pays dues in this business. Don't fool yourself. Everybody pays dues in this business. One way or another, you pay your dues. Okay? Used to, anyways. I don't know about any more these days, but you do. And it wasn't like these guys got a free ride. They got an opportunity. Who in their right mind would turn down an opportunity like that? You'd be a fucking moron to not take an opportunity. Be stupid. It's short-sighted as all you get out. So now you're going to punish these kids and make sure they do. And of course, you're going to stir up the guys that are the heaters to make sure that they really put the heat on these guys to, stretch them and teach them what the business is all about. And I don't care how tough you are, but when you're in the ring and you go, hey, here you go, and the guy comes in and just pops you, you're on the back foot from there on out. And, it was a situation of bad mood, frustration on Bob's part, and that was just a bad situation, and bad decisions were made, and it wasn't right.
And you ended up being given the role of head trainer in WWE Developmental for a while there, and you trained people like Beth Phoenix, Ryback, and Cody Rhodes. And I'm just wondering if you could give your opinion, since it's topical right now, on the whole Cody Rhodes situation in WWE.
I'm happy for him.
Yeah.
I'm happy for Cody. And the reason I'm happy for him is that one of the lessons I always tried to tell those guys was to, Wade Barrett, you want to mention names, Dolph Ziggler, Wade Barrett, I can keep going down the list of guys, CM Punk, all that were there with me. And I told every one of them, make yourself successful enough to where you can get out of the business on your terms. Leave when you want to leave the way you want to leave. Not because you have to or because they released you or whatever. Leave on your terms. Be in a situation to where you can make the choice. So if he made the choice, what's wrong with that? And let's get something straight here so that everybody understands, okay? I can't make this clear enough to people. One, you can't be fired. Wrestlers can't be fired. It's impossible to fire a wrestler. Can't hire them. You know why? They're not employees. It's not an employee-owner relationship. It's a business relationship. Promoter brings you in, and together you create a partnership where he will promote you and put you on TV and give you the opportunity to promote yourself and use that wrestling match as a commercial to sell you so that together that partnership makes money. That's how it works. Here's a surprise for you. No matter what the product is, whether it's a wrestler, a car, peanut butter, the public gets tired of it. It has a certain run. It has a shelf life. And at some point, it's got to go away. Back in the day, that happened all the time. It's not like this is something new. You started working in Michigan and Ohio. You had a run. That run lasted you 8 months. But then you peaked. Now you go work in Tennessee. You work in Tennessee, you go to Portland. You go to Portland, you go to Florida. At some point, you come back to Ohio and Michigan. That's the way it always worked. It didn't mean you can't never come back. Cody could come back, and maybe for Cody, it might be the best thing for him because for me, I was in WWF and I knew I had to leave and go someplace else. And the best thing that ever happened for me in my career was the ability to go somewhere else and to actually get a chance to reinvent myself and come back. Brand new, a different product that I could resell all again. There is this belief that WWE is the be-all, end-all, which it is the biggest stage that you can perform on. But if you use the stage correctly, you can now sell your product in other places because you've established an audience, the biggest audience you could possibly establish. And then you can always come back. There is no time limit. There is no time frame. Look at Ultimate Warrior came back.
Yeah.
Hulk Hogan came back. You know, how many guys have literally came back and had, you know, Road Dogg and Billy Gunn came back and they had a run. You can always come back. That's the way this business has always worked. There's never a shut door. So why would you not, if you're not in a place that you want to be in, instead of spinning your wheels, leave. And then at some point another opportunity comes up, because that's the way it works. Wrestlers are jigsaw pieces in a puzzle for a booker or a writer to place in certain places to create a certain picture. And sometimes, no matter how good you are, you're just not the right piece to fit in that picture. You want to be he wants to make a horse in a field, and you, for some reason, just don't, you want to be the main, but you just don't fit. You work better as a hoof. Well, I got to be the main. Well, it's not going to work. Do you understand? You're not going to fit there. But 6 months from now, who knows? You might be the thing that we're going to build the whole picture around. Or you might leave and come back in a year and a half, 2 years, and then all of a sudden, you're the thing that we're going to build the whole picture around. You have a better grasp, a better concept of who you are, what you bring to the table 2 years from now than you did right now. And you're in a far better position to perform and be able to produce at the level that you need to where we can build that picture around you. So why is it such a negative? One, when guys get released. Two, when guys make a choice on their own, much like when AJ Styles chose to leave TNA. It was the best thing he could have ever done.
Yeah.
He can always go back. And he can go back even better now. So why do people think that this ain't Walmart, guys? I'm sorry. It doesn't work that way. And I know that that's the only thing people can relate to, because that's what everyone does, is they do a regular job that you show up, you perform a task. That's not what wrestling is. It's not that kind of a thing. It's not that kind of world. That doesn't exist.
A couple more questions here.
Just drives me nuts.
Probably your most famous angle in WWE as a wrestler for a lot of fans is that big boss man angle.
Oh, with Pepper?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
the Kendall from I know.
From Hell match.
Yeah.
You want to just briefly go over?
I'm glad to, because I'll clear that thing up. I've been doing that a lot lately because everybody likes to bring it up because of the fact that Mick made so much fun of it. Here's how this works, okay? Every match has a gimmick. It's a focal point. It's what you build your story around. Understand?
Yes.
Easy. So that gimmick was about dogs. When I was approached, I swear to God, may he strike me dead where I stand. Vince Russo came to me because they had wanted to get rid of the head, which they couldn't because it was so over. And Vince Russo had seen the movie Son of Sam, where he heard voices from a Chihuahua. He wanted to give me a Chihuahua, told me the whole thing. I said, great. My exact words, please make sure you have highly trained animals. Why? Well, because the number one rule in entertainment is you don't work with animals or kids. They'll always outshine you, upstage you, or they'll screw up the whole scene. So, and especially important, never work with animals or kids. So, verbatim, the Chihuahua, highly trained, so that I can interact with it, right? Oh yeah, no problem. Okay, show up TV next week. There's a Chihuahua. There's a lady sitting with a Chihuahua. Oh, you're his trainer? No, I'm his owner. Oh, they called a veterinarian clinic in Detroit and got a list of names with the people that owned a Chihuahua. That's it. Immediately go to Vince Russo. I swear to you, as I stand, went to Vince Russo. You understand, I said trained animals. Oh, it's just the Chihuahua will be fine. When we get to this thing with these dogs, we have to have trained animals. Do you understand, Vince? Now, I forget exactly how many months this storyline went, but it went for a long time. Do you know how many times I reiterated that we needed trained animals? Numerous times that we needed trained animals. Numerous times that we needed trained animals. That we needed highly trained animals from the same kennel that could be led by 1 or 2 people verbally who stood outside the cage. I cannot emphasize that enough. I show up in Charlotte, notice that there are 7 or 8 dogs with 7 or 8 different people. Walk around, one has some obedience training. Now you have to understand the entire match, the entire angle is built around the focal point being these dogs. How can you use these dogs? What can you do with these dogs? Please explain to me, because I would like to hear somebody tell me what they expect you to do with them when they're out there urinating, defecating, and fornicating so much they couldn't even show them on TV. When the gimmick of the match is that you're inside a cage that's inside a cell that has, like sharks surrounding it, dogs that you now need to get through and out of the other side. And you can't even interact with the dogs. Curious. But now it's become a joke, and it's now all my responsibility, even though I had no control over the fact.
Whose responsibility would you put that on? Obviously, it was
the company's.
The company, yeah. But
It's not mine. I would, if they'd have told me go find it, train dogs. What do you think I'd have done?
You would have done it.
I would have made sure that I found trained dogs that were highly trained with one person, because every time I went and spoke to Russo, I said that. Vince McMahon himself actually apologized to me for putting me in that situation. So now I get people to ask me about that all the time because it's such a joke when I had nothing to do with it. Now, granted, the number one rule in wrestling is you have to take shit and make shinola. So it was my responsibility to try to make the best match I could in spite of the fact that we couldn't even utilize the dogs. Tried, brought a bunch of weapons out, tried to do everything I could to take the focus off of what we had literally sold the audience on for months to now in one night go, no, ignore all of that, watch all of this. Of course it doesn't work.
And was the boss man as upset about it as you are?
Yeah, he was. It was embarrassing for both of us. It wasn't just embarrassing for me, it was embarrassing for him too. I mean, you know, we're put in this ridiculous situation. I mean, what do you do? So, you know, and people, I love it when people ask that question because it gives me an opportunity to at least tell my side of it and to explain to people, because what people don't get is that, and I don't know why, any person with a half an intellect should understand that if you make a murder mystery novel and then there's no body, there's no murder, well, what are you going to tell a story about?
Right.
You know, it's kind of a bad situation.
And you're in TNA now. I just want to touch on it briefly. I'm not sure if it's TNA or Impact Wrestling.
Well, it's TNA, but it's Impact Wrestling.
Impact Wrestling is the show. Okay. And you're pretty well known for the gut check segment, and you had numerous segments with him, Joey Ryan.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what you think of him as a wrestler and what you think of this video, which I particularly hate, of the whole dick grabbing thing from Japan there that went viral.
I think Joey, I have a lot of respect for Joey. Joey, you know, what people don't understand is that, like, that gut check thing was a shoot. Like, the whole thing was, I went out and found guys that had never gotten an opportunity or whatever, and then had some kind of story to tell, okay. and then give them a match. And then when we went out in the ring, like, I gotta tell you, I never knew if we were going to hire him or we were going to pass on him, because I never knew what Bruce or Eric were thinking. And a lot of times, I got swerved. Like, I thought, oh, well, we're not going to hire this guy. And then next thing you know, we did. And Joey made his own opportunity, because Joey stood up to Taz. Taz tried to, put the spotlight on himself and tried to get over, and Joey didn't back down. And then when we went to the back, they, put a camera in his face, and he kept going. And I grabbed him and kept working with him, and like I drug him off camera. But he made his own spot. Literally, what he did that moment is what gave Eric and Bruce the idea to do that whole angle. Now, it should have been done with Taz, but Taz wouldn't have never, he wouldn't have wrestled, and he would never have done anything to put, to allow Joey to do what he did. So they were like, "Oh yeah, would you do it with him?" And then I was like, "Yeah, sure." And I did it with him because of the fact that he made his own opportunity, and that was, that was what it was all about. And as far as the video is concerned, for one, it was Japan. They do a lot of stuff over there that,
It
but
spawned a lot of people doing it here.
I'm sure it did. But for another, he was like the first wrestler to ever get himself on ESPN, long before WWE had their deal that they have now. And part of the reason that they have the deal now is because of all the response it got from Joey doing his thing on ESPN. Secondly, or thirdly, I should say, you can do anything you want to do in professional wrestling as long as you, the artist, paint the picture to where it makes sense within the context of trying to win, not lose. Anything. Don't believe me? I make people believe I can knock somebody out with a plastic head. Can I? No. You'd literally be in the middle of a grand mal seizure. I could hit you in the temple with that thing, and all it would do is make you go, "What? You hit me with a head?" But if I do it in front of an audience, in front of a wrestling ring, how stupid is that? Is it any dumber, him doing the test of strength with his penis? Is he any dumber than the people's elbow? Huh? Is he dumber than the worm? Is he dumber than me hitting somebody with a head? Let's be honest. So now we're going to split hairs because he did a test of strength with a penis. Another guy did a bulldog and then did looked like he had a seizure, and he should just pin the guy on the bulldog. It took 30 seconds to do the seizure.
That's true.
People's elbow. How long did it take to do the people's elbow?
And you're in TNA now, so I know you might want to just touch on this subject lightly, but there's always, for years now, there's been lots of rumors about the future of the
Hold
company.
on. That's not knocking the people's elbow or the worm or the head.
You're just using them as examples
of that. If those are okay,
of ridiculous things.
Why is
considered.
And they're not even really. When everybody first saw the people's elbow, what did everybody say? It was ridiculous.
That was goofy
and everybody first saw the worm, what did everybody say?
I really hope that does not become a regular move in wrestling.
I doubt it will. It won't. Surprisingly, I haven't seen it, but go ahead.
Yeah.
TNA.
Yeah. Just what do you think about the future of TNA? Are they going to finally, they've been doing well, holding on for a long time, but do you think they're going to
I hope
take it
so.
to the next level? Or?
I hope so. Gosh, I hope so, because, the wrestling business needs TNA. The wrestling fans need TNA. The wrestlers need TNA. Everybody involved or has some kind of interest or passion for wrestling should want to see TNA succeed. Vince, I guarantee it, probably wants to see it succeed because he wants to see it flourish because he wants to have somebody to compete with, and we need it. We need it desperately, and I don't understand. There's a lot about wrestling fans these days I don't understand. They're the goofiest bunch of people I've ever met. They really are. I genuinely hate them. I really do. I love the fact that they're fans, but I hate them. And this goes back to kayfabe. We used to have kayfabe out of respect for the business, and because that's what kayfabe was, and it was respect for the fans. And here's why. Opinion is the lowest form of human knowledge. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You can form an opinion with little or no actual information. And then you can go around and spout it off as if it's a real fact, when it's nothing more than theory, conjecture, and assumption. That's all it is just that. Real knowledge is not information. It takes a matter of information and experience together that make real knowledge. So you have a bunch of people, fans, that now have access and are privy to information. but have no actual experience. And since they have the information, they think they now have knowledge and an understanding of a business that they've never been in and have never had any experience. What's the problem with that? Is that it leads to assumptions, and it leads to conjecture, and it also leads to contempt. Familiarity breeds contempt, no matter what it is. The more familiar you become with it, the more contemptuous you become with it. And now you have a group of people, granted a minority, that are very vocal and they're very contemptuous based on information that they think is knowledge, that they really truly don't have any understanding or reasoning of why we do what we do, when we do it, or how we do it, but now assume they do because of information they have and become contemptuous of it. But they'll still watch it. And so what makes it worse is we have people on the inside of the business, performers, writers, etc., management, who live in a wrestling bubble, who now cater to this contemptuous vocal minority, as opposed to catering to the largest audience, which is the general audience that don't really know much about or care much about wrestling other than, hey, I want to be entertained. That's it.
And you brought up Johnny Canine off camera. What's your best Johnny Canine story for us?
My best Johnny Canine story? Johnny Canine was awesome. He was such a character. One of the things that make wrestling great would be a guy like Johnny Canine. It's like 5'8", just 320 pounds. You know, Johnny like broke the world behind the neck press, like 500 and some seated, 500 some pounds behind the neck press. And just would go everywhere in Zubaz, flip-flops, and no shirt. You know, true to the crew, across the derby, little hat, had the little tuft of hair. He was Taurus Bulba when I met him in Toledo, working for Bruiser Bedlam. He was Bruiser Bedlam down in Smoky Mountain. It's the best one. So here comes Henry Godwin, who was Tex Slazenger, I think, or something, Shanghai. He was Tex Slazenger in WCW. He had just gotten done in WCW. Have you ever met him?
No.
He's about 6'6", 6'7". He's a giant human being. He's about 350, 380. I mean, and he's a big man.
Yeah.
He's a big fucking man, right? And he's comes into a town, you know, comes in one of the shows, and Johnny comes up and does the, you know, and just walks up beside him, and you know, different thing, goes, "Hey, bro, buddy," and that's how he would talk. And what? He goes, "You ever wrestle?" And Henry was like, "Yeah, I just got done in WCW." He goes, "Puh, never heard of it." Of course he did. And he goes, "You respect the iron?" And Henry's like, "What?" He goes, "Lift the steel." "Huh? Respect the iron? What do you bench?" He goes, "I don't know, 4 plates." He goes, "4 plates, city's full. 5-plate man, don't even talk to me, go get me a cold drink." Walked off. And Henry's standing there like, the hell just happened? Never met him before. And that was Johnny. He'd go into a convenience store and he'd go in and start talking the whole time and making sandwiches. He'd open up the bread, he'd lunch meat. The guy behind the counter, "Hey, what are you doing?" Joe said it's okay, bro. It's okay. Joe said it's all right. Just get with Joe." And he'd eat the sandwich and go out.
That's hilarious.
He just lived his own life. I mean, he was hilarious.
And you can read about him in Chris Jericho's book for anyone that wants to know more. And anyone that wants to follow you, where can they find you? Anyone watching this?
The Real Al Snow on Twitter, The Real Al Snow on Facebook, The Real Al Snow on Instagram. And yes, there were fakes. And when you fake being me, I will write you and tell you to step it up and at least raise the bar. And if you're going to imitate or be a celebrity, aim higher. Why the hell are you shooting for me? Get somebody else that's cool and is actually over for a change. Fuck.
And you're also beating up Scottish people on TNA.
I am also beating up that fat bag of suck, Grado, on TNA, and his compatriot, Shira, who I'd be kicking his dog and calling him fuck off. And then I have my new French tag team, the Tribunal. So I have a regular international cuisine of wrestlers, between 2 French wrestlers.
Well, you were the European champion.
I was the Europeanist champion. I wanted to call it that just all the time so that I could have Steve Blackman, who would be the hardcore champion. I could have a vignette where I go, you're hardcore champion, I'm Europeanist champion. Him go, you called me a what? And I go, I'm a Europeanist champion. You calling me a penis? But they wouldn't let me say it on TV, so.
And any final message to your fans to close this off?
I just want to say thank God you are fans. And I don't know why, I don't know how, but I am eternally in your debt for you to allow me, a grown man, to continue to make an ass of myself in public by fake fighting other grown men for money. Some of them buttered up like a tub of popcorn in a very homoerotic fashion where I can feed my family and never have to work a real job. Because I don't know if I could ever fit in the real world after doing this shit. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.